The following podcast is a W2M Network original production. Visit W2Mnet.com for all of our other great podcasts, plus news, reviews, articles, and opinions from the worlds of wrestling, video games, football, and entertainment.
Wrestling to the Max, NXT Review.
And we are live to the W2M Network for the Wrestling to the Max, kind of, sort of, adjacent-ish NXT Takeover Philadelphia post-game wrap-up show here. Don't worry. Gary, Paul, and Sean will be with you with their NXT thoughts tomorrow when they do the Royal Rumble. But since this is a wrestling website, we wanted to get something up immediately, so yours truly got tagged in. Hi, everyone. I am your host. My name is Harry Broadhurst. Joining me on this particular episode, I cannot get away from you, Brandon.
No, you cannot. We both got tagged in tonight.
Yeah,
we got the double hot tag.
Mine was lukewarm at best. Mine was like, you want to do it? Go for it. Why not? And then at that point, I needed somebody to host it with me because, doing one of these by yourself just sucks. But,
oh, yeah, no, that's near impossible.
But we actually do have a little bit of stuff to discuss when it comes to tonight's NXT Takeover Philadelphia show. And why don't we go ahead and kick things off with the pre-show? What do you say?
Yep.
All right, we're not really going to talk about much on the pre-show just because it was an hour. It was mostly promos and video packages. But there are a couple of things that I do deem discussion-worthy from said pre-show. So let's go ahead and talk about the first of which, that being the NXT Awards for 2017.
I was just about to say, end-of-the-year awards.
Yeah, and the overall Superstar of the Year, as well as the Female of the Year for NXT for 2017, is Asuka.
For 2 years in a row.
I'm okay with this to an extent. That being said, she wasn't in NXT for the full calendar year, so I'm not necessarily sure I agree.
I'm okay with it simply because she left, in October?
She debuted on the main roster in October. Her last match in NXT was back in August, though, because remember, she suffered that shoulder injury against them.
Oh, yeah, you're right. So, it's only, 2/3 of the year, or, a little over, about 2/3 of the year. So, it's a little meh, but, who else maybe not so much for the overall, Superstar of the Year, but, definitely for the females.
That can't be argued. I'm not even going to try to give you an argument for Female of the Year for Asuka, okay. But overall Superstar of the Year, I don't think the Male Superstar of the Year was correct either, and that's despite the fact that I really like the guy.
Yeah. Well, but, that's the thing about this whole year in terms of NXT is that, Bobby held the title for most of the year, but, he wasn't really that dominant of a champion. So he kind of falls by the wayside, whereas, Aleister Black, while he hasn't held the title yet, he's been dominant since he's joined NXT. So I can understand where it comes from. And in terms of Asuka winning it, I guess it's just purely because, while she was on NXT, she was completely dominant. And, I think the fans also kind of wanted to give her that, 2 years in a row recognition.
Because there's also the whole going away present aspect to it as well.
Exactly.
NXT fans thanking her for her service with the brand until now that she's on the main roster.
Yes, I would agree with that.
We'll see what happens with her in the Women's Rumble tomorrow night. We actually do get a little bit of information about the Women's Rumble during the course of tonight's show. We'll talk about that when we get to the women's title match.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go ahead and discuss the feud of the year for NXT as well real quick. And this one I have no disagreement with. Aleister Black versus the Velveteen Dream.
The only thing that I'll say about it is that it was a very short feud. So, like, there are a few feuds that I would say were longer and arguably even better. While you didn't really get the huge payoff with it, the whole Bobby Roode against Roderick Strong feud was great. While this one wasn't all that long either, the whole, big tag team war that you had that culminated in the War Games match was good as well. I see where people come from, but just for me personally, like the whole Velveteen Dream versus Aleister Black feud just felt a little rushed to me.
I would agree with that to an extent, but I think that's because they have bigger plans for Aleister Black.
I'll agree with that, but what I mean, but even disregarding the fact that it was only a one-match feud, even prior to that, they only got, 2, maybe 3 weeks worth of build to it?
There were more than that. The build for this match went basically from TakeOver Brooklyn all the way up to TakeOver Houston.
Okay, maybe it was just very small little snippets, whereas,
The thing with the NXT roster is it may not have been built every week, but they were slow burning it all the way between Brooklyn and Houston because you remember with the 1 hour weekly television span that NXT has, they don't get to work in every single feud on a week by week basis.
That is very true, which I still think, and they say it last year, and I thought they were going to do it this year at some point, but especially with the influx of new guys that they're getting, I'm surprised they aren't planning on expanding it at some point.
Well, I will say this much. If the rumors of them going to an actual broadcast channel end up being accurate, I do feel like they will go to 2-hour broadcasts.
Probably. You're right.
Any other NXT awards you want to discuss?
The only other one that we haven't discussed yet was the match of the year, which was Bate against Dunn.
I have no argument with that. That was my second best WWE match for the year overall.
I mean, I rank my matches a little differently than most in terms of a technical level and purely looking at a match, on a purely match star rating type situation. I would have to agree with that. But in terms of entertainment value, I would say that my match of the year was the War Games.
I actually went with Styles and Cena as my match of the year for the WWE. Dunn and Tyler Bate was my NXT match of the year. Mm. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with the other NXT awards. They'll probably announce them this Wednesday night on NXT television because I believe there were 3 or 4 other ones that didn't get handed out tonight. Mm. The other one that we actually didn't discuss real quick that was handed out tonight was Breakout Star of the Year, and that was Aleister Black, and I don't think that needs any further discussion. I mean, that's obvious.
Well, it's honestly weird, though, that they gave him both Breakout Star and Male Superstar of the Year.
Fan voted, so...
Oh, true, yeah.
And I do want to talk about the final thing that we saw in the pre-show, which I kind of think teased our main event for NXT TakeOver WrestleMania, so TakeOver New Orleans. Zelina Vega coming out and sitting on the panel and, first of all, busting Samoa Joe stones, which I thought was hilarious. Just because she's this little 4'0" chick getting all ballsy around Samoa Joe.
Well, because she knows Joe can't do anything about, which I was so glad she finally got something out of it, which we'll talk about later.
Anyway, one of the things that I did want to mention, though, is the fact that she was constantly harping on the fact that Aleister Black won a bunch of awards, but where were the awards for Andrade Cien Almas?
Oh, this is... I really hope that this is setting up basically equivalent to, what's her name? The late Lacey Evans calling out Nikki Cross, and next week she's going to get her butt whooped by Nikki Cross. I really hope that this leads to Aleister Black just kicking his head off.
Well, we'll talk about the results of tonight's NXT TakeOver show here in a bit. We're about to discuss the show itself, but I felt like that was a right proper tease for what I do believe will be the NXT TakeOver New Orleans main event.
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely.
With that being said, what do you say we get to the actual TakeOver card itself?
Let's do it.
All right, our opening contest is the NXT Tag Team titles on the line. And before we get started with that match, though, I do want to mention that Nigel McGuinness missed the show. How do you think Mauro Ranallo and Percy Watson did by themselves?
I think they did fine. I mean, yeah, Nigel would have added some extra flavor to the broadcast, but, I think they did fine on their own.
I think the big thing here is that Percy didn't actively drag the show down by himself, so I was impressed by that. Because there have been certain weeks on NXT television where Percy Watson is damn near intolerable.
I mean, Mauro just raises the level of the commentary team no matter who's on color.
I don't disagree with that, but at the same time, I do believe that Mauro and Nigel is the better combination.
Oh, I'll agree with that. But, you could basically put anyone on that team with Mauro, and they would at least be, serviceable.
Excuse me. Opening contest, tag team titles on the line, as I mentioned. The champions, the Undisputed Era, a.k.a. Redragon, of Bobby Fish and Kyle O'Reilly, taking on the Authors of Pain, Akeem and Rezar, with their manager, Precious Paul Ellering here. We end up seeing about 15 minutes worth of action here, and the Undisputed Era pick up a clean victory to retain the tag team titles as Kyle O'Reilly rolls up one of the members of the Authors of Pain. I can barely tell them apart. I think it was Akeem. I'm not sure.
I think you're right, but I'm not 100% sure.
And the Undisputed Era retain the tag team titles.
Yeah, a little shenanigans at the end, which you expect with Undisputed Era. But, I mean, this was a solid match. Let me first go back to before the match. Did you see Kyle O'Reilly using his title as a air guitar?
I did not see that, but he's been doing that before, so it wouldn't surprise me.
But yeah, I mean, it was a solid match. It'll be interesting to see. Maybe not quite yet, or maybe, you never know. But this seems like, I mean, it wasn't a clean finish, so Authors of Pain have an excuse, and they did continue their feud later on in the night. That wasn't Authors of Pain.
No, I'm sure referring to, no, that wasn't the Authors of Pain, which is going to take me into what I was going to ask you, actually. Do you think that this is the beginning of the end for the Authors of Pain in NXT?
I was just about to say that. I have a feeling that this is the end. This will probably be the end of the feud, unless they decide to go until New Orleans, and then they lose at New Orleans and they get one of those, post-WrestleMania call-ups. But they're getting called up very soon, one way or the other.
I don't think there'll be the New Orleans match there, because I think the more obvious New Orleans match is the team that got involved a little bit later on in the show. We'll save that for when we get there. Or, and now would be the time to discuss this, the team that we saw in the crowd immediately after this match.
Mm-hmm.
The WWE debuts, NXT debuts technically, of Todd Hansen and Raymond Rowe, a.k.a. War Machine. Well, we said when we did, Sean was with me. I sat in and helped him review Wrestle Kingdom earlier in the year. Sean was with me when I said this felt an awful lot like War Machine's write-off from New Japan Pro Wrestling. And sure enough, what do you know?
Yeah. I mean, I'm a big War Machine fan, and, I'm hoping they do well in WWE, but, I really hope that they don't just become, in NXT they probably won't, but when they get called up to the main roster, I hope they do not become just generic big men, because I want to see Hansen do a moonsault in a WWE ring.
Not to mention, for a guy that, despite being 5'11" and built like a brick shithouse, Raymond Rowe is incredibly deceptively agile as well.
Oh, they're both, but that's what I'm saying. I have a bad feeling that, in the Vince McMahon world of, the Giants, in the land of the Giants, that they're just going to become generic Giants where they're just powerhouses and you don't see their athleticism ever.
I have an admitted bit of bias here since I've actually had the opportunity to work with Raymond Rowe before. I was a play-by-play announcer for a couple of shows that Raymond Rowe did, so I have a little bit of a built-in bias here towards Raymond Rowe. That being said, I do think that in NXT they will be fine. The question will be, how do they translate to the main roster? Because they could very easily be the Revival on the main roster, or they could very easily be the new version of the Ascension on the main roster.
Well, either way, that's not exactly very good considering how everyone is talking about what's going to happen to the Revival tomorrow night.
I think the Revival will be just fine.
I said it before, and I'm saying it again. I'm fearful for Authors of Pain when they get called up. I'm fearful for any other tag team when they get called up. NXT tag teams are not successful on the main roster for whatever reason.
I mean, it's hard to argue there isn't really a successful example of an NXT tag team on the main roster.
There's Zip, nada, zilch.
Vaudevillains, nope. Blue Dragons, nope.
Enzo and Cass, nope.
They missed their chance with Enzo and Cass.
I'll agree with that, but that's the point. Enzo and Cass and the Revival are probably the two, and earlier on the Ascension are the three most likely teams in terms of how well they were used in NXT to be successful on the main roster, and they went nowhere.
You can't really include the Revival in that statement yet because the Revival hasn't had the opportunity to fully get their feet on the ground due to injuries.
I'll agree with that. But considering that, I have a feeling that Vince is going to say, you're too injury prone. We can't trust you.
All right, so I did this before we started the show, so I'm going to do it again now because it'll pop me at least. DREAMO. As the Velveteen Dream takes on Cassius. Oh, no. Oh, okay, I'm going to get sued.
Oh, no.
Stop. I'm going to get sued, so I'm going to stop here. Velveteen promised a 30-second knockout victory on the pre-show and then almost delivered with that first right hand.
And then he thinks it's boxing.
He tries to get the referee to deliver a 10 count. The referee looks at him like he's half crazy. Cassius Ohno gets back up and knocks the absolute bejesus out of him with an elbow.
See, this is one of those, that's one of the things about Morrow being on commentary that, especially in a match like this or with Shayna Baszler later on, that just adds so much extra to the match. It's like how JR, in a completely different way, but it's like how JR added extra, ambiance and extra nuance to the match. Him with his experience in other combat sports adds that extra knowledge that puts you into the match so much more.
So I have a little bit of a confession here.
All right.
I really like both of these guys. That being said, to me, this felt like the most disappointing match out of the 5 on tonight's TakeOver card.
Well, I mean, that's not really much of a surprise because 3 out of the other 5 matches were title matches, and the 4th one was an Extreme Rules match. This was kind of just a thrown-together match. Yes, both guys are very good, but it was just kind of a thrown-together match, and with how Cassius Ohno has been used lately, you knew what was coming out of this match.
That raises the question for me here, too, based on the responses that we heard during this match. Is Velveteen on his way to a babyface run, or do you think they stay the course with him for now?
I kind of feel like he's gonna be kind of like a KO, where they're gonna stay the course with him and keep him the way he is, but he's still gonna get cheered regardless.
I mean, he has kind of that cool heel vibe to him there, that it's his personality work is so good that you can't help but respect it.
Mm-hmm.
The match itself ends when Velveteen Dream hits the Purple Rainmaker, coming off of the ring post with it at 10 minutes and 50 seconds.
Can I just say real quick that I really want them to change the name to that finisher?
I'll bite. Why?
Because, I mean, granted, a lot of smarkier fans are getting on board with him now, but if he wasn't as good in terms of personality as he is, and wasn't getting as over as he is on his own, that would be a huge turnoff and a giant middle finger to every smark in the building. And I'm surprised that they do not boo him out of the building for that.
It's not their fault that he's more talented than Okada is.
False.
Not false. 100% true. Way more personality. This is sports entertainment.
I know this.
Velveteen is way more entertaining than Okada to me.
He may be entertaining, but he's entertaining in that annoying Mizzy way.
Disagree. He's entertaining in that old school Goldust way to me.
Oh, okay, that's actually a better comparison. Yeah.
He's so in touch with his gimmick that he's able to even do the little things and the little nuances and stuff that sell it.
And the Tyler Breeze way.
To that extent, yeah, almost. That's even a more modern example of it. Absolutely. Look, I know there are a bunch of New Japan fans that are going to listen to this. I know there are a bunch of New Japan apologists that are going to want to have my head for that. But to me, plain and simple, I actually feel that when it comes to the complete package, in-ring work, character work, promo ability, ability to connect with an audience on a regular basis there, I think Velveteen does so better than Okada does.
I mean, part of that is because you don't see that in New Japan. You don't see the other aspect of it.
Okay, but let me add another thing in here to prove my point about Velveteen. How many years has he been a wrestler?
I have no idea.
2.
Okay.
He's doing all this with about 2 years of experience under his belt. Imagine how good he's going to be once he has 5 years under his belt.
Oh, I know this.
Imagine how good he's going to be once he has 10 years under his belt. We are just seeing the beginning of the Velveteen Dream, the Patrick Clark experience.
Oh, I know this.
Remember, all hate mail about my comments can be sent to s.garmer@gmail.com. All right, shall we move on?
Yep.
All right. Shown in the crowd is Maria Menounos, although Mauro had a hell of a time pronouncing her name. And we find out that Maria will be the ring announcer for the Women's Rumble. I'm actually okay with this. I'd rather have Maria as the ring announcer than Stephanie on commentary. Mother son of a...
Oh, you know what that's leading up to.
We'll see if she shows up. I feel like we had this conversation on Tuesday, Brandon.
We did, but I'm not talking about that other person.
Oh, well, this leads to her cutting the ovaries off of as many of the females as she possibly can.
Yep.
Good safe distance ovary cutting. Snip, 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 snip.
Oh, it won't be a safe distance.
Well, depending on where the announcers are seated, no,
I have a feeling that you'll be hearing her music hit at some point. This will be 2012 all over again.
Oh, so help me God. If okay, shut up, Harry, before you say something you can't take back on a podcast that's being recorded. NXT Women's title is on the line as Shayna Baszler challenges Ember Moon. We see the finish come at about the 10-minute mark where Baszler has Ember trapped in a Jujigatami, a cross-arm breaker. When Ember is able to shift her weight and ends up catching a stacked cradle on Baszler, holding her down just in time for the 3 count. Post-match, Baszler gets her heat back by choking out Ember. Let's first talk about the match itself. I thought the match itself was pretty good. It seems like the story that they're going to want to try to tell with Shayna is that she's going to bully people as long as she can, and that the objective when it comes to being in the ring with her is to survive as long as you can and then pick your openings, much the same way that Ember did tonight on TakeOver, much the same way that Kairi Sane did at the finals of the NYC.
Yeah, I think the story they're going to tell with Shayna in the ring is that she's completely focused on submissions and she's still thinking that this is MMA. And so the key to beating her is to, realize that it's not and, go for a pin that she can't, comprehend.
So to try to catch a quick one.
Exactly. Which is exactly what Ember did tonight.
Much the same way we saw Ember do tonight. That leads me to the next part of this discussion here with the attack by Baszler after the match. Obviously, this isn't over, but I don't think it's a straight-up singles match at NXT TakeOver New Orleans. Your thoughts?
We'll see how things go moving forward. But yeah, you're probably right. I would assume that the main person I could think of that to add onto that match would be Kairi Sane.
Either Kairi Sane and or Nikki Cross.
And Nikki Cross, yeah.
I mean, Lacey Evans doesn't have much of a chance come this Wednesday night, but
yeah,
I could definitely see Nikki Cross getting back involved in the title picture come WrestleMania season.
What would kind of be interesting is Nikki Cross, like during that Nikki Cross and Lacey Evans match that I think is happening this week, that Cross wins and then, Shayna Baszler comes out and tries to choke out either one, and either, that leads to Nikki Cross facing off against Baszler or, it'll lead to them facing off either way, no matter who she goes after. Either she'd be the one to get choked out, or she'd go after Baszler for trying to choke out Evans.
Yeah, I don't think that we're done with Nikki Cross in the title picture in NXT. I don't think we're done with Nikki Cross down there in the women's title picture until Sanity goes up to the main roster, which I do think will happen will happen some point this calendar year.
Oh yes. The more interesting question for the women is for tomorrow, seeing if there's any of the NXT people in that match.
I think we'll see 2.
I think we'll see a few as well.
I have 2 in particular.
12 open spots.
Well, I think there'll be 2 in particular that weren't involved with tonight's show. You might call them iconic.
Oh, okay.
You're sitting there wondering who I was talking about, weren't you?
Yes, I did.
Well, there's your answer.
Okay.
How about the next guest that we see in the crowd?
Ricochet!
Using his real name, no less. Trevor Ricochet Man. They've been kind of teasing some stuff with Ricochet and the Street Profits on Twitter. Ricochet is a heel.
That's going to be odd.
I mean, it's not like we haven't done it before. New Japan's used Ricochet as a heel before. I've seen Ricochet as a heel in Pro Wrestling Guerrilla as well. It's not something that we're accustomed to.
Heel in New Japan.
Huh?
I'm trying to remember when he was a heel in New Japan. I don't distinctly remember that.
I know he's been a heel in Pro Wrestling Guerrilla before. And I want to say that he was a heel for Dragon Gate for the longest time as well, especially with the Dragon Gate USA thing, because he did the Spiked Mohicans with SEMA.
Oh, okay.
Any coincidence to the fact that they showed Ricochet right before Adam Cole, Aleister Black?
I definitely think that Adam Cole will try to recruit him.
I feel like Adam Cole and Ricochet could be a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, they could be fun.
It is the Extreme Rules match next as Adam Cole takes on Aleister Black. Let's talk a couple of the big moments in the match, and then we'll talk the finish. The first moment that I want to talk about in the match is the attempt at the trading kendo stick shot. Aleister Black turning all ninja, avoiding the weapons, and then mistakenly goes for his moonsault cross body block, his no hands moonsault cross body, and gets whacked while he's upside down with the kendo stick.
That was great. That was a great spot.
That looked like it hurt like hell.
Oh, I'm sure it did. You could hear the thwack.
As somebody who's been hit with a kendo stick before, screw that. I actually have one in my apartment, no less.
Oh.
From an old wrestling show that I went to.
Oh.
It's the souvenirs you get as a fan, Brandon, I'm telling you.
Yep.
All right, let's move on here. The next big spot that I kind of want to talk about is the table spot.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't want to give too much away from the show because I'm sure people are going to want to go watch it for themselves. And if they've already watched it, then they don't need us to sit here and break down every little thing. But, so, Aleister Black is up on the top turnbuckle. Adam Cole tries to throw a chair at him. Aleister Black catches it because, ninja. Adam Cole then proceeds to thwack him with a super kick, and Black falls off backwards through two tables that they have set up on the floor, busting open his back.
Yep.
I don't know if you caught that or not. It definitely cut his back.
I don't think I distinctly noticed his back cut open, but I noticed some blood around.
It looked like right at the small of the back from the table spot, I'm guessing.
I don't want to be the bearer of bad news for those of us who like these kinds of matches, but I wonder if after this one and what happened to Alexander Wolf at War Games, if they're going to limit these table spots.
I mean, that's the problem with doing weapons matches, though. I mean, when you're working with inanimate objects, stuff happens.
Oh, no, I know this, but you know how WWE overreacts to things like this, like the whole GTS situation.
Okay. I don't. No comment on that. We had that discussion already once this week. I don't feel the need to have it again. If you're interested in hearing
I have a feeling that something will come of this, unfortunately.
If you're interested in hearing the conversation that Brandon and I had about this, make sure you check out this week's 205 Live review, available in the archives over at W2Mnet.com or by searching any of your podcast listening apps, Stitcher, iTunes, Podbean, CastBox, what have you.
Shameless plug.
Shoo! All right. Back to the match in hand here. I do want to talk about the ass bump that Adam Cole took on the ladder that ended up having to stoppage there because of the blood on Adam Cole's hand. Seemed sketchy.
Yeah.
Kind of hurt the momentum of the match. Luckily, they went into the table spot almost immediately after that and got some of it back.
Mm-hmm.
So Cole goes for the coup de grace. Not that coup de grace. He goes for the fireman's carry driver. I can't really call it a Death Valley driver. It's more of an FU, honestly. Onto the chairs, but instead of setting up the chair like he did on the NXT television 2 weeks ago, he instead sets them up Mick Foley style, back to back with the chair backs facing. Aleister Black proceeds to make him pay for that by hitting the FU onto the chairs himself.
It was basically like, oh, you're going to set this up to try to hurt me? Oh, I'm just going to reverse it and do it to you.
I believe the comment that I saw online that made me chuckle for this is the next WWE GoFundMe will be set up for Adam Cole's spine. That checks out. All right, moving. After that happens, it turns into a fracas. A major league fracas. Because when Black goes for the cover after said attitude adjustment, FU, whatever you want to call it, on the chairs, Kyle O'Reilly and Bobby Fish proceed to get involved. They beat Alistair around ringside and have him set up over by the announce table when Barnett. Okay, I'm going to get sued. I'm going to stop. Sanity interrupt as Eric Young and Alexander Wolf proceed to open a can of the whoop ass on the Undisputed Era's Fish and O'Reilly here. Obviously still pissed about the fact that they didn't get their tag team title rematch.
Yep.
Killian Dane is inside of the ring and proceeds to almost murder Eric Young with his tope suicida. Yeah, one person ate that suicide dive the most, and it wasn't either member of Redragon.
Oh, yeah.
Eric Young got mushed. Meanwhile, back over at the announce table position there, Aleister Black decides to try to finish Cole off once and for all, as it is the double knees, chocolate rain as Ricochet likes to call it, putting Adam Cole through the announce table. Back into the ring, Cole cuts off Black with a super kick. Cole goes for the chair a second time, and Black Mass ends us at the 22-minute mark. Just me, or did it look like Black Mass kind of landed on the chest, not the jaw this time?
Yeah, it didn't even look like a Black Mass to me. It looked more like just a regular super kick.
He had the spin there, but I think the location was a little bit off.
Oh,
That being said, though...
Maybe it was the location that just threw me off.
That being said, though, with all of the shenanigans and chicanery involved in this match, I still really enjoyed it.
Oh, yeah, this was one of the better matches of the night.
Although it was not the best match of the night, and that has everything to do with our main event. We'll get to that in a second. So that sets up Aleister Black as the still undefeated in singles matches possible challenger for TakeOver New Orleans. Dun, dun, dun. Dramatic reverb. Shout out to Eric Watkins. The Super Bowl preview episode of The Kickoff is this Wednesday night here on the W2M Network. So, do you know what else happened tonight, Brandon?
Andrade Cien Almas versus Johnny Gargano?
There was something before that.
Oh, EC3.
Say that NXT is in trouble.
It's crazy at how many people they debuted tonight, and we're not even done yet there on that level.
Well, that wasn't a debut. That was a return.
True, but you know what I mean. How many quote-unquote new people they had in the stands tonight.
More people added to the puzzle.
Yes.
I mean, we kind of saw Candice earlier in the night in the backstage segment with Johnny, and then she gets involved in our main event as well. But we'll talk about her in a second. Let's first of all talk about the fact...
You ruined my fun.
Let's go ahead and talk about the fact that in the crowd is the former Derek Bateman, but not acknowledged as such. Instead, he is EC3.
Which is really surprising to me.
Please, for the love of everything that is holy, bring in Dixie Carter at least once with Ethan. At least once.
You know they're not going to do that, but...
And Eric Bischoff was never going to show up on WWE television either.
Fine. I'll give you that one. I mean, yes, if they're going to have him keep the EC3 name, you kind of have to have her come in at some point. Just to make fans realize the reason why he's called EC3.
Yeah, I'll be curious as to whether or not they explain what EC3 stands for to the WWE fan base, because I'm not sure. I mean, I'm sure most of the NXT fans, the IWC fans, know what EC3 stands for.
Oh,
but if there are casuals watching the NXT episodes on the WWE Network who don't have any idea what an Impact Wrestling is, they won't know that EC3 stands for Ethan Carter III.
That's true, that'll be a big indication on whether or not they bring her in. Is if they reference it, if they mention the full name at some point, then yeah, I have a feeling they'll bring her in at some point.
I don't think you have to do that. I think you got to remember that she appeared on a WWE 24 already, so she's been on the network.
All well and
All
good, Sean, but I think in order to sell the EC3 character, she has to appear with him.
Exactly.
Well, what I'm saying is I don't think it's out of the question that they bring her in.
That's true.
She's been seen already. It's not like you can't go on the network and see her in an interview and they make it known who she was. So if they want to bring her in, they can.
I do believe that Brandon is correct, though. If they acknowledge what EC3 stands for, then it makes it much more likely that we see Dixie Carter on NXT television.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he could also get his name changed before he even appears on television, too. So.
True, because, I mean, think about it. Back when Asuka first was in the crowd, they still called her by her Stardom name, and then they changed it. So all of these names may or may not be what they're called in NXT.
Well, I mean, technically they added an extra N when they showed her name on WWE television, but yes, I understand what you're referring to.
Yeah.
Because when they showed it on WWE TV, it was Kanna. Kana.
Right. But still, they were using, while they screwed up on it, they were still using her Stardom name.
See, I don't think it was a screw up. I think it was on purpose.
Oh, okay.
Just so that way they had something that they could trademark if that's what they decided to go with.
That's true, yeah.
All right, that does take us to our main event now, and that is the NXT Heavyweight Championship on the line as champion Andrade Cien Almas with Zelina Vega, looking very pretty tonight, takes on challenger Johnny Gargano. A little surprised to see El Idolo come out first, but he does get the bigger of the two entrances. Sean, I want you to come back on here because you and I were kind of talking about this when it happened there, and I believe the message that I sent you verbatim was he just La Sombra'd us.
Was that actually the mask that
yes.
he would wear? Okay, that's what I was wondering.
Yes, that was his La Sombra mask. And a lot of that I have to give credit here to Mauro Ranallo for acknowledging the fact that he is third-generation Mexican superstar known as La Sombra.
Yeah, I mean, that was cool that they, because they had shied away from it after it wasn't working when Vega wasn't around, and obviously once he changed and became a much better character when she showed up, they've kind of been putting that in ever so slowly, so I feel like that's great that they let him have this entrance and people got to soak that in and everything. I don't know if you need to do that all the time because I still think that there's a stigma, especially on the main roster, for luchadors, but
it's a shelf life situation. I agree with that. I think it's something you can get away with in front of the NXT fan base, maybe not the main roster fan base.
Yeah.
Kind of like what I was just talking about a little bit earlier about the fact that, let's be honest here, the majority of the NXT viewers are, you would say, the smarter fans, the IWC fans.
Yep.
I don't want to give away too much about this match because, frankly, if you have not watched this match and you're listening to this podcast, pause this podcast, go watch this match. You'll thank me later.
Spoiler alert.
Brandon?
Yes.
They crowned their 2017 NXT Match of the Year tonight.
We still have a long ways to go in 20.
We may have just seen the 2018 version because it's going to take a hell of a match to top this one.
I'll agree with you on that. Even though I do not like the finish, but yeah.
Why didn't you like the finish? I thought the finish was fantastic.
Because I want Gargano to have the title.
Why would Gargano need to have the title when he's getting ready to feud with his returning partner?
True.
They're not going to put Tommaso Ciampa right into a title match upon his return here.
I'm just not looking forward to Almas's matches when you don't have the possibility of them doing what they did tonight. Because when you don't have what they had tonight, you get Miz 2.0.
Wait, explain.
Matches, when it comes to guys like Almas now and Miz, where you have a valet at ringside, it goes in the same exact pattern every single match, with tonight being the obvious exception for obvious reasons, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
Okay, but what's going to happen one of these times is Zelina's going to go to interfere in one of these matches, and the guy's going to put her on her ass.
No, they won't. This is WWE. You're out of touch if you think that's going to happen.
Well, I don't necessarily mean like stick her with a punch or something like that, but one of these times she's going to try to sneak into a ring, try to Hurricane Rana a dude, and the dude's just going to let her go and powerbomb her.
No, that's not going to happen because it's WWE. The only way that it works is the way it worked tonight.
What you're referring to, of course, is the aforementioned Mrs. Johnny Wrestling, Candice LeRae, who made her NXT on-screen debut a little bit earlier in a backstage segment, not at ringside, thank you.
Well, they did also reference her at ringside before this match, which led to what happened.
They did. But as soon as Zelina gets involved and goes to get involved again, Candice jumps the rail and attacks Zelina Vega. That did not surprise me. I fully expected that.
I was being very optimistic that it was going to happen, but I was happily surprised that it did, because I had a bad feeling that they wouldn't want to take for one, I didn't think that they were going to do 2 interferences from new people in a matter of 3 takeovers, for one. And for 2, I thought I didn't think that they would take the luster off of Vega that quickly. I'm happily surprised that they did, but I was a little surprised.
The finish sees Andrade Cien Almas hit the charging double knees up against the ring post after kind of knocking Gargano silly a little bit earlier in the match. And then the rope hang variation of the Hammerlock DDT spells curtain as Andrade retained in about 32 minutes. Yes, every bit of 32 minutes, every bit worth every single second of those 32 minutes.
Especially the Candice stuff. That was great.
Post-match, Andrade gets his celebration. We see him go up the ramp. Nothing happens with Andrade. They come back to ringside, and we see Gargano making his way to his feet to a huge ovation from the fans in Philadelphia. Let's not forget that Gargano did cut his teeth in Philadelphia working for promotions like Chikara, like the Combat Zone. And then as Gargano gets to the top of the ramp, accompanied by his wife, he is then jumped from behind and attacked by a crutch-wielding, returning Tommaso Psycho Killer Ciampa. There's your takeover New Orleans blood feud.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think there's any question that these guys are going no disqualification, no holds barred, and maybe even the steel cage.
Yeah, depends upon what they want to do with it, because steel cage kind of limits you.
Not necessarily. You can get out of the cage before the match starts and brawl around if you'd like to do that, but then you can
and grab weapons.
You can have the violence inside of the cage that these two would definitely be able to live up to, which I have no doubt that they could.
Now, I don't know if they would want to do this just because, they'd want to probably, the logistics of it, and, they'd want to keep it as a specialty for the main roster. But this feud would definitely be worthy of a Hell in a Cell.
I think you could do something of an NXT variation on Hell in a Cell for these two, maybe like the old WCW Thunder Cage.
That could work. Or basically do, don't call it Hell in a Cell. You could just call it a steel cage match, but basically, have the old, 99, 2000 WCW cage, where it's...
The triple cage?
What?
The triple cage?
No, the one that Vince Russo won his title in.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're referring. That actually was a triple cage, by the way.
Oh, okay, it was. Oh, okay, never mind.
That was the Ready to Rumble cage.
Oh, okay. But, like, you could have that just without the triple part. Like, just, basically have it Hell in a Cell, but don't call it Hell in a Cell.
I definitely think that we're just getting started in the next chapter of Gargano and Ciampa here, and I was fully anticipating this. I'm glad they waited until after the match to do it.
So am I. I'm glad that they not only did they tell the story of Vega with with Candice. First off, I would love to see that this won't happen, but I would love to see either like Vega get all annoyed and like call her out or something, or Candice call her out and like just see Candice have a match with Vega and destroy her. But I'm glad that they told the story that they did within the match and had almost win pretty cleanly, which gives him more credibility as the champion now. Before they did the whole Gargano or the whole Ciampa thing.
That being said, I want to go back to what I said at the start of the show before as we talked about the end of the pre-show here. Zelina Vega very specifically mentioning Aleister Black, and then Black and Almas both win their matches on this TakeOver. Is there any doubt in your mind that the TakeOver New Orleans main event is Almas defending the title against Aleister Black?
Not unless there's some sort of shenanigans that puts it into a multi-man match. But more than likely, you are correct.
If there is a match in NXT that can top what we saw tonight, that might be it.
Yeah.
But it's going to be...
Again, like I said, now, Black is one of those guys that, I would hope that they'd be willing to let him loose and have him hold no qualms. But, that's one of those where, it's going to be very interesting to see how they play it with Vega, where it's like, Black is supposed to be this, like, ruthless guy, and he's letting Vega, beat all over him.
I'm curious as to whether or not they're going to actually go the route of having them as a straight singles. I feel like that would be the proper way to go, but at the same time, there have been situations before where they've gone the multi-man route for their main shows.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think this is one where it's necessary. I think the obvious solution right now in regards to having a babyface that can carry the brand in NXT is to get that belt onto Aleister Black as soon as possible.
Oh, definitely.
Because that guy is crazy over, and not to mention so incredibly fluid in the ring.
I think while I don't know how long they want to go with this whole undefeated thing with Black, but I think my ideal, moving forward would be Black wins it in New Orleans, and then loses it to Adam Cole at some point, whether it's in wherever Money in the Bank will be, or
Chicago,
or Brooklyn. Oh, it's going to be in Chicago again.
The next takeover after New Orleans will be Chicago in May, and then it'll be Brooklyn in August.
Yeah. So either have him lose it to Cole, either in Chicago or Brooklyn. Probably.
I think the way to go there may be having Black take the belt at New Orleans, lose it to Cole and Brooklyn, and then get called up to Raw the next night.
Yeah, that sounds...
Two nights later, excuse me.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Because there's not going to be a whole lot else that you can do with Aleister in NXT once he drops the NXT title.
Exactly.
All right, Brandon, scale of 1 to 10, what do you give tonight's episode of TakeOver?
I'm gonna give it an 8.5. There were a lot of really good moments. Nothing really bad per se. I would have liked to have seen Gargano win the title, but I get why they didn't, so they can set up the Ciampa versus Gargano feud. But but, overall a very solid NXT takeover. You know what? Actually, I'm going to push that up to a 9.
Well, that is exactly what I was going to give it, as a 9. So I can't complain here. Ono and Dream had a good match, but not a great match. There were a couple of rough spots there. That being said, it told a wonderful story.
And it was just a fun match, and they had that whole funny moment with Dream thinking it was a boxing match in the beginning.
Ember Moon and Shayna Baszler was not a great match by NXT women's standards, but it was a very good match with a very strong story.
Oh, yeah.
The tag team title match may have been the best work we've seen out of the Authors of Pain since their feud with DIY.
Mm-hmm.
The last 2 matches on this show, the Extreme Rules match between Aleister Black and Adam Cole, and then that main event, make this show worth going out of your way to watch. You will not find a better hour of wrestling this year so far. Plain and simple.
Oh, yes.
NXT TakeOver Philadelphia gets a 9 from me.
Let's see how tomorrow can, probably not, but maybe top it. The only way I could even see them even semi-topping it is if they have some crazy surprises in the Rumbles.
Well, I got a question, Brandon. What do you say we do this again tomorrow night?
Let's do it.
Hey, Garmer. Yo, Sean, you with us?
Sean has left the building.
Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, Sean Garmer has left the building. I feel like I'm going to have to message him on Facebook in order to get his attention.
Probably.
Sorry,
Oh, there he is.
there was something playing, like I was trying to do something else, or something playing, and I was like, well, I don't want to press unmute right when this is going on.
You
we will
watching?
talk about this off air. No, I'm gathering news for the games podcast that I'm doing after this. So.
Here I thought you were getting ready for a new beginning in Sapporo Night 2.
No. So we will talk about this off air.
Well, kind of an on-air announcement to make real quick here. Unfortunately, due to scheduling conflicts, Patrick Ketza is not available for Wrestling Unwrapped tomorrow night. So our official return has been postponed until February 12th, where we will be reviewing the Royal Rumble.
Well,
That
there
being
you go, people.
That being said, if Brandon wanted to get together and do something tomorrow night for an immediate review, I would be down for said situation. We'll talk to Sean. We'll let you know what he says. We'll get back to you. Check out the Facebook page, Wrestling to the Max, for more information. How's that?
Sounds good.
All right. Hey, Brandon, where else can they find you?
They can find me on Tuesdays for the SmackDown review with you and Liz.
Depending.
What?
Depending on the day of the week and how me and or Liz is feeling.
Yeah.
We do need to talk to Sean about that as well, but we'll talk to him off air about that part.
Yes. And you can find me and Harry and Eric Watkins on the kickoff on Wednesday nights. We did not do a show this week because we did not really have much to talk about, but we've got our big go home for the Super Bowl this week.
I love how you call it a go home, like it's a wrestling thing.
Oh, yeah, I'm so used to calling it that. I'm sorry. It's the go home for the season there.
Stephen may or may not be there as well. We don't know on a week-to-week basis.
So we've got our big Super Bowl show this upcoming Wednesday, and then following the Super Bowl, I will be starting a new fantasy football podcast that will just do a quick little recap of the season, and then we'll get in full swing once the draft comes around.
Give your co-host a mention. What's his name?
Jason
Teasley.
Yes.
You can, as Brandon mentioned, you can find me here on the kickoff. You can find me here on the Wrestling to the Max, SmackDown Live, and 205 Live weekly reviews. You can find myself and Patrick Ketza with the return of Wrestling Unwrapped coming to you in February 11th, I believe is the actual date, because the 14th is a Wednesday, therefore the 12th is not a Sunday. And Brandon and I are talking about putting together something called How the War Was Won, which may end up filling in the gaps between Wednesdays for the kickoff, as we present the Monday Night Wars between the WWF and WCW. That will be available here on the Wrestling to the Max Network as well. Make sure you guys come back tomorrow night here on the W2M Network to listen to Sean, Paul, and Gary break down both the 2018 Royal Rumble as well as their thoughts on NXT TakeOver Philadelphia. This Monday night, they will have the next episode of Wrestling to the Max, and then Gary and Paul, I was right the first time. Gary and Paul will be with you for the post-Royal Rumble episode of Monday Night Raw on Monday night as well. You can listen to myself, Tony Acero, and Andrew Ballas as we present the Raw reaction immediately after Monday Night Raw at 11:30 p.m. on the Chairshot Radio Network. So for our executive producer, Sean Garmer, my co-host this evening, Brandon Biskobing, I'm Harry Broadhurst, thanking you for listening to the quick reaction version of the Wrestling to the Max NXT TakeOver Philadelphia review here on the W2M Network, available online at W2Mnet.com. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll catch you guys down the road.
The following podcast is a W2M Network original production. Visit W2Mnet.com for all of our other great podcasts, plus news, reviews, articles, and opinions from the worlds of wrestling, video games, football, and entertainment.